Well, with that theme playing, you know that it's time to go out to the other coast of the United States, where we find Michael Snyder, and he's been looking at some movies. So, how bleary-eyed are you?
Pretty bleary-eyed because it's watch at home or don't watch at all. You know, I'm kind of weirded out that the James Bond film has been moved to spring of 2021 because of the pandemic, and I'm not real happy about, you know, are we going to see Wonder Woman this year? And I don't want to go into a movie theater, so there are some worthwhile things to check out thanks to streaming services, and you can rent or buy stuff. But again, the big blockbusters are on hold for now. You heard about Soul, the Pixar film, right?
No.
The latest Pixar film that looks gorgeous, which is about a musician who dies and whose soul is left adrift. Going to be debuting on Disney Plus right around Christmas, and I don't think there's an extra charge for it either. And it looks expensive and beautiful.
Okay, all right. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, let's get to what's new. Okay. It makes good sense that you know, the crusading liberal creator of TV's hope-fueled political drama, The West Wing, Aaron Sorkin, is the guy behind writing and directing The Trial of the Chicago 7, you know, the political aspects of it. It's new this weekend on Netflix, and it's really engrossing, sometimes funny, and ultimately kind of sad. A dramatization of the famous 1969 trial wherein Nixon's federal government charged 7 left-wing activists, including Tom Hayden, Rennie Davis. Is that his name? That was his name.
Rennie Davis, yeah.
Hoffman and Jerry Rubin, of conspiracy to incite a riot during the protests at the 1968 Democratic National Convention in Chicago. For good measure, the feds also threw Black Panther leader Bobby Seale into the trial as an 8th co-conspirator. But in any case, when lawyer for the defense William Kunstler tries to point out a number of the indicted were just doing their own thing, some intending peaceful protest, others, particularly Hoffman and Rubin, creating absurdist political theater, and Seale giving a short speech and then bugging out, and were attacked by overzealous cops and National Guardsmen. This elderly, reactionary, super conservative law and order judge, Julius Hoffman, no relation to Abby, has none of it. And this just spurs prankster Hoffman and his crony Rubin into more anti-authoritarian behavior. As it happens, the wealth of left versus right, liberal versus conservative, freedom versus repression dynamics implicit in the story are more than relevant in what appears to be the verge of the most consequential election in memory, and certainly the most important election of my lifetime. There is, of course, a bit of the patented Sorkin smugness here and there, but that shouldn't stop anybody from checking out what is a very well-made look at a watershed moment in American history, and a roughly 6-month political trial that was a travesty in most senses of the word. I know that some of the hijinks perpetrated by Hoffman and Rubin were left out in this rendition, but watching the defendants and their lawyers being held in what I thought was well-deserved contempt of court is never less than amusing, in part thanks to the fine cast. And the cast here is really on point. Kudos to Eddie Redmayne as the fiercely intellectual and nominally nonviolent Hayden, Joseph Gordon-Levitt as a straight-laced prosecutor on the case for Nixon's Justice Department, Mark Rylance as the crusading defense attorney Kunstler, that old pro Frank Langella as the nominal villain of the piece, Judge Hoffman, and especially Sacha Baron Cohen as Abby Hoffman, inveterate hippie trickster, and he steals the show. You knew Abby, am I right?
Yeah, not only that, I mean, he used to call me every night during that trial.
You'd be a good judge as to whether or not Cohen captures the essence of Hoffman in this, but there are so many moving parts that, you know, whether he gets it right or not, it still was effective to me. The trial of the Chicago 7 runs about 2 hours, but it's enlightening if you don't already know the details of the case and the event that preceded it. It's fascinating and occasionally fun, whether you know what happened in 68 and 69 or didn't. I recommend it. Again, it's on Netflix. Let's move on to some things that opened in the past few weeks that I think are of interest. A Rainy Day in New York is the latest from Woody Allen, a filmmaker you might have heard of. And it sat in release limbo for a couple years, and it should have stayed there, really. Stilted dialogue and plot. It's self-indulgent and lazy. It's kind of humor challenged, and it's filled with those Allenisms that uncomfortably evoke his, let's call it a soiled public image. Hip young actors are on board, a few veterans, and the problem is they're unconvincingly mouthing Allen's now creaky pop culture references of yore. The lead character is a rich kid named Gatsby Wells. That's right, a mixture of the great Gatsby and Orson Welles. Thanks, Woody. He's played by Timothy Chalamet, but every major male character in the cast, specifically Chalamet's feckless college boy in A Weekend in New York with his girlfriend, Liev Schreiber's miserable art film director, and Jude Law's anxious, nebbish screenwriter. They're just pieces of Woody jumbled into what I'd call a rickety cinematic sculpture. At one point, Gatsby's brother tells a couple of hoary Borscht Belt jokes that Allen probably heard or wrote when he was on the writing staff of Your Show of Shows in the 1950s. And the references to movies and music from the past coming from virtually all of the young people, not just Gatsby, who's kind of vintage obsessed. All that seems patently false. Elle Fanning plays Gatsby's girlfriend and college classmate, a school newspaper journalist who has an interview in Manhattan with Schreiber's director character, and it's like she's channeling Drew Barrymore, and not in a good way. And Fanning's talented. I really like her in the Hulu series about Catherine the Great. You get your typical lounge jazz from Woody, classic old tunes from the Great American Songbook, and actually Chalamet sings a nice version of Everything Happens to Me, but that's really not enough. It's sort of this memory of a Manhattan that doesn't exist anymore, which was Woody's old sweet spot. It seems flat and forced this time around. None of the kids feel real. I do like stylized, hyper-real movies and retro stuff, but this all felt gratuitous on Allen's part, just rehashing his obsessions with little new to say. The cast, people want to work with Woody Allen, Cherry Jones, Diego Luna, Selena Gomez, Rebecca Hall, so on and so on. Nonetheless, this is not Blue Jasmine.
All right, let's get to the next movie, okay? This is taking an hour to review this one.
Well, it's Woody Allen. It's New York. I wanted to give it its due. You know what? Petrified Woody. That's what it is.
Well, the due is not a review that is as long as the movie.
Well, it isn't, as you well know. Okay, On the Rocks is the latest from writer-director Sofia Coppola, who's got a pretty spotty filmography, but made some really memorable and worthy films, including The Bling Ring, The Beguiled, and the movie that kind of earned her critical esteem, Lost in Translation. Happy to report that On the Rocks reunites her with one of the stars of Lost, none other than Bill Murray. This is by no means a classic, but the team of Murray as a well-to-do art dealer and bon vivant, and Rashida Jones, Quincy Jones and Peggy Lipton's kid, one of the stars of The Office and more, playing his daughter, a New York City writer, wife and mother who fears her husband is cheating on her. This all makes the trifle a treat. And the movie ambles along like Murray himself in a genial way. Nice portion of his insouciant comedy, not particularly deep, but hanging out for an hour and a half with Mr. Murray and Rashida Jones is as easygoing and diverting a time as you could imagine. It's got the vibe of a lot of Murray's other work, but it's sort of carefree and charming. And despite the question of the husband's fidelity, and Marlon Wayans is actually pretty much a prop in that role. This is a lot of fun to watch the father and daughter investigate and have their comedic repartee. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed On the Rocks. It's also available online in various streaming modes. I think especially Apple Plus this weekend. I think it debuts on Apple Plus this weekend. So On the Rocks, to me, was way more enjoyable than the Woody thing. Let's close out with The Boys in the Band, which is on Netflix. First-rate movie adaptation of the groundbreaking award-winning drama by playwright Mark Crowley that caused a big ruckus in 1968 when it was originally mounted off Broadway. It's kind of it seems like a time capsule. It's a depiction of a group of gay men at a small party in Manhattan, and back then must have looked like a peering into an alien world, and nowadays, especially since LGBTQ people and culture have long since gone mainstream, even though there's a lot of prejudice and bigotry to overcome in the community, it's a lot more familiar. The majority of the cast from the recent acclaimed Broadway revival, they're all on board, uniformly excellent. And it kind of illustrates how far we've come, because the most familiar names in the cast, Jim Parsons from Big Bang Theory, Zachary Quinto from Star Trek, Matt Bomer from White Collar, they're all out and accepted by the public. They're well-loved, and they're cast in straight and gay roles. Not the case for some of the original cast in '68. Anyhow, The Boys in the Band shows the haven an all-gay gathering was for homosexuals back in the day, with a bit of what might seem like stereotyping in retrospect, but it also shows the longing for acceptance, the self-loathing, fear of being outed, and downright cruelty and backbiting the marginalization could foster. It's got a universality and relevance today. I thought it was quite well done, directed by Joe Mantello. What are you watching on TV, pal?
Well, the one treat we got this week that dropped was the first episode of Star Trek Discovery. And it did not disappoint. It was very good.
Really nice, almost a relaunch, and I love what they did with it.
Yeah. Well, it's not a relaunch. I mean, it's just a continuation.
No, I mean, yeah. They've moved forward into a very new circumstance for Star Trek. Not spoiling anything, they've gone years beyond where we left Star Trek with Star Trek Picard, which to date had been the furthest into the future that the series and franchise had ever ventured.
Well, this is 930 years into the future. So.
Yeah, even further than 930 years beyond where Star Trek has always been. Yeah. So that's cool. And Sonequa Martin Green, I watched the episode. Mm-hmm. She's a great job, and I love David Ayala, who was added to the cast as a sort of a roguish courier type in the far future.
Okay, tell them where they can find you.
On Culture Blast, at Culture Blast, on Twitter and on Facebook at Michael Snyder's Culture Blast page, and here on GABNet when we get together.
Yeah, we'll see you in a couple of weeks, Michael. That's it for now. Stay tuned for more GABNet. It's coming right up. Stay where you are.